Hello, I'm Andrew Hara, the host of the Bomb Squad. I wanted to tell you about my movies. All are available on Tubi, which is a free streaming service. The last one is a zombie drama about how a pandemic and isolation could drive a group of people mad. When the virus hits, John finds himself alone and scared until he meets Michael, his protector. But when Karina, another survivor, enters the mix, everything that John and Michael knew will be turned on its head. The last one's a zombie virus movie that's somehow even more relevant today. Plus, it has zombies. Check it out. Borderland is a mexploitation film about living in El Paso. When Sarah finds herself in debt to the cartels, she has until sunrise to find some missing monies with the help of her executioner. Borderland is a true midnight movie and a lot of fun. Finally, the documentary Humble Spirits tells the story of the Hahn family, including champion Jennifer Hahn from El Paso, Texas. The entire Hahn family has grown up in the combat sports and has helped shape who they are both in and out of the ring. Humble Spirits, a family of fighters, is the perfect documentary for boxing fans of all ages. Check out Tubi to watch all my films. And now, let's start the show. Happy New Year! It's 2023, and you're listening to the Bomb Squad. I did it like a radio show. For all our new subscribers, we got so many new subscribers. Welcome. Welcome to a new year of the Bomb Squad. And we have a very special January. We're going to, I was going to try to make a pun, but I couldn't think of one. So we're going to be doing, we're going to be doing Hellraisers. We've done we did the remake last year, and now we're gonna do at least the first four. There's like 1,000 Hellraisers, so we might not do the whole series right away. We are gonna definitely do the first four. So join us. Join us as we go to hell and we raise some questions about the pin. I know you guys are on your pins and needles.
Yep,
Chatterer.
got him.
I know you're the guy with sunglasses who's fat, kind of.
I do like. We'll talk about this later, but it's like one of them has pins in his head. One of them's lips are gone, and like he doesn't have like a jaw. The girl's open throat, and then there's just like a fat guy who's there.
Yeah. Like, was he burned? His baby melted? I don't know.
What was he doing? They were like, "Nah, you're good. You look hideous." He's like, "I haven't done anything yet." And they're like, "Oh my god, you're like the best monster out of all of us." He's like,
Put
"What?"
these sunglasses on.
Yeah.
You'll need
Put
them
these
for this
sunglasses on.
bright lit hallway.
Yeah, close your eyes real tight. We'll
Yeah.
go from there. But yeah, so we're doing 1987's Hellraiser, directed by Clive Barker, starring Ashley Lawrence, who I've met and who's very nice, and also Doug Bradley, who plays Pinhead himself. Funny thing, originally they didn't give him a name, so the name Pinhead is not actually in the movies. We just call him Pinhead for no real reason. I guess there's a very clear reason,
Yeah.
but
Even the
but he's
subtitles
not
said
supposed to
Pinhead
be.
on the Amazon version.
Yeah, I feel like it's like one of those things where it's gone back on itself. Which started as he was never called Pinhead, but they call him Pinhead so much that even Amazon's like, okay, we don't care.
Yeah.
Do they do it in the later movies or just never?
I know they do it in the remake because people were like, it's cool to finally hear him referred to as Pinhead, and I was like, is it cool? But I don't know. I guess we'll find out as we go along on
That's true.
our 12 movie journey of Hellraiser movies. But anyway, Josh, start off this new year by telling us what this movie is about.
Bad boy Frank Cotton loves to get into trouble.
Right.
and he buys a puzzle box, but it turns out to be a bit more puzzling than he expected.
Truly.
Yeah,
Truly.
Josh, would you say that he's on pins and needles?
I wouldn't.
No. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'd say he's pretty casual about the whole thing.
Yeah.
Would you say that he's on fat guy with sunglasses?
But it is funny. I do this movie, like, it's funny how not sexual. I know there's a sex scene in the new movie, but how not sexual it is compared to how like hypersexual this movie is. So I was like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is
lots
like
of
the theme,
lots of
It
fingers
you
is.
and
know?
mouths.
Yeah. It is crazy. Like, yeah, how much more? Well, okay, so yes, so Frank Cotton is like this kind of weird guy. He has this puzzle box, and if you open the puzzle box, the cenobites come and they take you to hell. And so he does that, and then we also follow his niece, called played by Ashley Lawrence, and she's just kind of there. Like the brother and the wife have moved into this house, and so she's away at college, but she's visiting, and the dad wants her to move in. She plays Kirsty. There's a lot of plot in this movie. So the dad wants her to move in with his new wife, played by Claire Higgins, and her name's Julia. And then they're like, let's get them to move in, and then we'll have a lot of fun, and blah, blah, blah. And so then Julia, the wife, finds Frank upstairs because he's escaped from hell. And now he's upstairs, but he needs blood to reanimate because he's just like he doesn't have any skin or any
Kind of
bones.
a corpse,
Yeah,
yeah.
the more blood he gets, the more human he becomes. And so that all happens, and then so like, and then it cuts to a flashback. This is all just the plot synopsis, by the way. It cuts to a flashback, and Julia and Frank had hooked up one time, and so then it cuts back, and so now Frank is like, "I've always loved you. Bring me more bodies." So then Julia goes surrounding bars and tries to seduce men so that Frank can kill him. And then eventually they want Frank to take over Larry, the dad's body, and they also need Kirsty there for some reason. And then Kirsty finds the box. Then she opens the box, and the cenobites come, and she's like, I didn't know what it was. And they're like, well, too bad, we're gonna take you to hell. And then she's like, oh, but what about Frank? He left. And they're like, that's not true. And they're like, oh shit, it is. Well, bring Frank to us and we'll
They're
make
like,
a
someone
deal.
check on Frank.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they literally do that because they come out and they're like, no, Frank's not gone. And
Yeah.
then like the lady Thunderbite's like, oh, what if he was?
Yeah, I think one of them says like, if he was,
Yeah.
what does that matter to
They're like,
you?
I'm not saying he did escape, but hypothetically, if he did, where would he go? Do you
Yeah.
know?
And then she's like, I'll take you to him. And then I love it whenever Pinhead was like, well, maybe. Like, you know,
He's
like her
like,
dad, like
let's
being on his
let's do that, and
concession,
then we'll see
maybe.
what happens.
We'll see.
Yes, yes.
So funny. He's just like so
So
hardcore, and then he's just like,
yeah,
we're
it's
not
really
doing
like
this.
they drop the ball and they're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
So guys, what did you think of the first Hellraiser? And have you seen? I know we all saw the remake, but have you seen any of the other ones?
I had seen this one a long time ago, but I like just I don't know. I must have been doing something else because I didn't remember anything from it. But I thought it was good. I thought it was really fucking gross. It was like disgusting even by today's standards. It's like there were points where I was like, I didn't like look away, but I definitely felt myself like churning. I was just like,
Yeah,
Jesus Christ.
I think it's like, well, and same thing. I saw it like a long time ago, and I was like watching it again for the first time. I did remember like how much of it is not like the cenobites. It's more about like Frank as like this zombie man kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah, he's pretty much the main villain.
winging it and really making things happen. Because it's like
yeah,
he's so dynamic and like kind of driving it, whereas the weird Russian guy from the remake is so nothing. You know, it's like
yeah.
total like flip where it's like,
Oh,
oh
yeah.
yeah, he's
Yeah.
like the
Right.
most interesting character, and then that guy's barely a character. You know.
Yeah, well, and I feel like we shouldn't like comparing this movie to the remake isn't really fair because the remake's like the most generic horror film, and I feel like we just be hating.
Well, I also haven't seen the sequel. I mean, I saw like part of the one where Pinhead's like a World War II pilot or something. I don't even know which one that is, but
Yeah, this is John. This is a Josh vaguely remembers other movies.
I'm just saying I've only seen the first one in the remake in full,
Right.
and then I've seen like a
Yeah,
scene
yeah,
where
yeah.
Pinhead's like, "Oh man, I sure am sad about World War II."
Yeah.
Oh, right. And we'll get to
That's it.
that one. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think to me, Hellraiser is one of my favorite films because of the way, not only because of the way it's structured and especially the way the cenobites are like written, but also, and I don't know if you guys noticed this, but this movie all takes place in that house. That's the only location they had.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's kind of cool. Like you can watch it for the story, but you can also watch it to see how much you can do with just one location, and like how much like there's so much story in this with like Chrissy having she's having her own things and she's like getting ready for college. The dad is like trying to soothe this relationship between this new stepmom and the daughter, and also like his brother was like a scumbag, and then Frank is like legit. There's like a Candyman's horror story upstairs.
Right.
Like in this one house, every level is a completely different movie. There's like a coming of age movie, there's like a family drama, and then there's Frank's sexual horrifying escapades going up in the attic.
Right.
There
Pretty
is
much
a very brief
serial killer.
her in the hospital. That's it.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
then the Chinese restaurant.
Right. Yeah, a few scenes
Oh yeah,
outside of it. Yeah.
that was very. I mean, the restaurant's very like.
It's all
You
thrown
just
in the
needed a
house.
table and some chairs. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the last day's budget move there.
And I did actually watch this movie in preparation for Last Ones, because the Last Ones also only has one location,
Yeah.
except for a few other locations.
Right.
Welcome to 2023. We stopped trying.
It takes place all in one place and other places. Check it
It's
out.
unique. Yeah, it's unique that it takes place in one place and other places as
Yeah,
well.
it's the first of its kind.
Yeah. But
Doesn't
yeah,
it like? Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was just saying like it is good though because it is like 95% of it really is just in like this like one location. It's
Yeah.
kind of intriguing.
I would
yeah.
say more than 95%. There's like so much of it that's just here. Like, and there's even like a scene where they're
99.3% for sure.
yeah, there we go. There's a part where they're like, oh, let's walk outside, and they're clearly just like walking around the house.
Yeah.
But it shows you what you can do with like such, because if you think about this movie, nobody ever talks about the limitations it had with its budget and with locations.
Right.
And I feel like it's because you're so engrossed by the actual movie that you don't really think about it. And I think like the best like low budget kind of films are the ones that don't let you like that keep the low budget from you, like where you don't even know about it.
Yeah.
And like Josh was saying, it is crazy because like you see the like Frank at the beginning, he figures out the puzzle, and then you see the cenobites just a little bit. You just see them appear and they take Frank to hell. And then you don't see him again for like until Kirsty opens the box like 40 minutes later.
Yeah.
And so it really is like the first I think for like 40 minutes, it's just Frank and the wife, Julia, like hooking like finding guys and murdering them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's intriguing on its own, you know?
Yeah.
It's also like funny like how immediately confident Frank is because he's basically a skeleton when she first finds him and he's like, don't look at me, you know.
Fucking Voldemort
But then like
character.
he kills one guy and he's still basically like a ghoul, but then he's like, ooh, come here. She's like, no,
Yeah.
not yet.
You're still wet.
I think like, and that's a huge difference between. I know I just said not to compare to the remake, but between a lot of the other films and this film, this movie is so wet. Like,
Yeah.
Frank's always sweating.
Mhm.
The cenobites look like they're wet and like kind of murky. The hell that they bring out is all wet. And I feel like there's a scene where Frank escapes from hell, and like Josh said, he comes out as like a bag of bones. But it starts like there's like some blood, and he rises out of the blood as a skeleton. But it's not like a clean skeleton. He's got like bits of like whatever.
He gets like a little
hanging
bit of
from-
meat on him.
yeah, like phlegm and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. He's pretty much just what are they called? The aliens from the Alien series? Like they're just constantly
xenomorphs?
just- yeah, the xenomorphs
Yeah.
just constantly just goo just all over the place. And
Yeah.
it's gross. Like
Yeah.
I remember as a kid that like didn't bother me, like just like really gross stuff like that. But for some reason, watching it this time, I was just like, I don't know, I was just so fucked up. Like I haven't seen anything like that in a while, and it was like practical effects, so like it didn't seem, digital or fake or anything, even though it looked like it was made by somebody. But I
Right.
don't know, it was just crazy to see like such intense practical effects. Like I guess it really had just been a while since I've seen something like that, but it really got
Yeah, like yeah, I think again that's so it is that thing like because I saw Terrifier 2 yesterday, and it does the same thing where like sometimes I mean I can always watch the movie, but if it gets too gross,
there's a way for my brain to like disconnect and just be like in awe of the special effects, you know?
Yeah.
And this movie kind of makes it hard because it's so sticky and gross
Yeah.
that I don't really know how they did it.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I just can see a sticky, gross man rising out of blood, and it just kind of looks disgusting. You know?
Yeah, like it feels authentic. Like the movie
Yeah.
feels like lived in.
Yeah.
Like you're like, I believe this is happening to
Right.
them.
Right.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And also like with the house, we were talking about it's all like in the same location. I think that house is also kind of cool because it's like it is a big house and there's like a lot of room, but I feel like they shot everything like just like super close to the walls, and it feels like the house is like
Yeah.
super cramped except for Frank's room, which is like the only room that they really showed like a big wide section of. Like every place else feels like you're in a corner or like there's
Yeah.
not enough room for you to breathe, except for Frank's room, which was kind of cool. It kind of makes the rest of the house feel like claustrophobic and dangerous, even when it's not really that dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree because like the cinematography is where anytime two characters talk, they're like this close to each other.
Yeah,
Like it feels like the house is like closing in on them as they talk.
totally.
And like every like and I think it's like not only it's not just the cinematography, but it's also the blocking because they make them every time they meet, it's almost like they're trying to walk past each other and they just kind of get stuck and they have to talk.
Yeah,
And so it definitely gives you this like you definitely feel like you're trapped in the house
right.
even before like crazy shit is happening. It just kind of gives you this uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah, like
Yeah, well, they kind of do it like because the wife Julian's like unsatisfied in her
Right.
marriage,
Yeah.
and to show like how it's like nothing's really wrong, but she's still like, oh, I'm like trapped in this.
Yeah,
You
there's
know,
no
it's
way out
interesting.
right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is, I can I say too, like the brother Larry, her husband, it's like plays like the perfect like well-meaning loser.
I know,
you
I know. He's so annoying even when he's
It's
being
just
nice. You're just like,
just
fuck
this kind of
you.
nice guy who doesn't understand. Yeah, he's like,
Yeah.
what's wrong? You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Doesn't
It's
boxing make you sick?
yeah.
What?
It's definitely like a dad where you wouldn't tell him everything, but you wouldn't have a bad relationship with him. You just be like, yeah, it's my
Totally.
dad.
Because he just wouldn't get it.
Yeah, exactly. Like you wouldn't get anything.
Yeah.
like your brother is upstairs and he's half a man and you're not even helping him.
Yeah.
Um,
Your wife
also,
is
I
murdering people and you have no idea what's going on.
yeah. Also, I think it was cool. We skipped over this, but at the very beginning, the opening title sequences are underlined. And I don't think I've ever seen that before in opening title sequences. Like all the credits were underlined. And
Oh,
I
I
don't
don't
know,
know if
it
I
kind of
noticed
gives,
that.
yeah, I don't know why I notice it every time, but it's so funny to me because it's like you don't think of about credits being underlined in a movie, you know?
Right, right.
Yeah.
That's funny.
It gives it a more like, you're like, once you start watching, you're like, oh, this kind of feels like a book, you know?
Mahal.
Only books underline things. And okay, so now I want to talk about one of my favorite things about this, and this is Josh's fault for putting this in my head. But unlike in the remake, one of the things that I like about this movie is how the Cenobites are portrayed. Because, and we're gonna see it a little bit more later, but it's this way where they're not inherently evil or good. Like if you solve that puzzle box, they're coming to like their job is to come for that puzzle box.
Right.
So once you solve it, it's not necessarily like they're giving you what you're asking for. You just don't know what you're asking for.
Yeah.
And they even tell Christy, they're like, "Oh yeah, you opened the box. You want to play with us, and that's what we want too." Like they're like, what are you talking about? This is what you wanted."
Yeah.
And I like that makes them it sets them apart from like Freddy or Jason, who like they just want to kill you, but the idea that like Christy asks them like, "Who are you?" and they're like, "Oh, we're demons to some of you, but we're angels to others." And it's like, first of all, no, you're not.
Yeah.
Although, because first they say we're explorers in the further regions of experience,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
such a like, oh, they have no. They're just like, no, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we're just.
Well, and you really
Maybe.
like you kind of feel it in this whole idea of like, you know, there's that line where like BDSM is a thing that people can do in a healthy way if they want to. And like, but you are like using pain for pleasure. And it's like, what if you take that to the furthest extreme? And that's kind of what the Cenobites are, where like when I was a kid, I didn't understand why Pinhead had the pin stuck in his head. You'd think they'd be sticking out like in a traditional monster. But once you learn who they are,
Yeah.
you realize that like, oh, those pins aren't for you; they're for him.
Right.
They're for him to get off. You
Yeah.
know, like,
Yeah.
and so again, like I think that that's so cool that they do that, like that they're treating the monsters like this. And then I also like that you kind of see it even in like you see where like how Frank could have gotten here because he's like, oh, he likes to party. He's like the fun time boy, and it's like
Yeah.
this is where it's leading him. You know?
Right. Doing
Yeah.
things he never thought he'd be doing.
Exactly. Yeah.
That wasn't me, man.
And I like that there's apparently originally in the because there's Pinhead is the main one, and then the lady Cenobite is the second main one, and they're the ones who talk the most. And I found out that the reason that they talk is that the Chatterer, who has like he has no lips, and then the big fat guy who just like has a big prosthetic. It was so hard for them to talk that they originally had lines, but they just ended up giving them mostly to Pinhead and to the female Cenobite because they could talk easier.
Right.
And
That
Yeah.
makes sense.
and that cemented Pinhead as the lead Cenobite, and also like he's the one. Like if I showed you the girl, you probably like. I mean, you could probably guess it was Hellraiser, but you wouldn't really know her because she's not as well known.
Yeah, she looks kind of like
But
the Fifth Element lady.
yeah, she does. She even has
Yeah.
the same outfit, kind of.
Yeah.
But if you see Pinhead, everyone knows Pinhead is from Hellraiser. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do like their in general their thing. And I like that because the whole thing is like Kirsty opens the box, she doesn't know what it is, and so she makes a deal with them, and then they're like, okay, well go do that then. And they just kind of like leave her to her own devices. Like
Yeah.
they're not really like gonna be chasing her. It's just kind of like it's a similar
Although
thing where
they
it's like
do,
we'll find you. It doesn't matter where you go.
Yeah, they don't
they
need
do
to.
kind of like because at the end when she does give them like Frank, they're like, oh no, we're
Yeah.
still gonna like take you, and she's like,
Yeah.
what? You know, he's like,
Yeah.
I did say maybe we'd consider
Right.
on doing it,
Well, and I
but
wonder if
Plain
that
nice
I've
looking
never
woman.
read. William, did you finish the book?
No, I was starting it whenever we were gonna do the other one, and then after we watched that one, I was just kind of like, I'm gonna move on to something else. But I read a map that was by Clive Barker. It's kind of like this, like really long fantasy book,
Oh yeah.
and it like wasn't as gross as anything Hellraiser related, but like he definitely talks a lot about that kind of idea, like just like how far pleasure will go, and like what people are like really seeking, and like what are their actual desires, and like where does that lead you. So I think that's kind of like a common thread through like how
Yeah.
much trouble can you get yourself into is kind of like
Right.
Clive
Right.
Barker's thing. It seems like, and I haven't read a whole bunch from him, but from what I've also kind of gathered online, like that's a pretty common thing for him to talk about, just like excess and disgusting, but also somebody really enjoying it, and you're also really enjoying it because you're reading it as like a horror fan, you know.
Right. 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 Yeah, and that is funny because I've read a couple of Hellraiser comic books, and Clive Barker writes them. He doesn't just sell the property. But I also read one of his other books. It's called New Testament. It's a comic book, Next Testament,
Yeah.
and essentially it's what happens. Like it's Jesus returns, but he's like he's like the God, and so he has no regard for human life. Like he'll just take down a jet just because he's kind of bored.
Yeah.
And it's this kind of thing where it's like if like he's really thought about like if a god existed, there's a chance that he would not care about us at all because
Totally.
if he's making humans, it could be as easy as him making cookies, and if you break a cookie,
Who
who
gives
gives
a
a
shit?
shit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
And so you kind of get a little bit of that sense here where it's like Pinhead and the Cenobites, they'll make a deal with you and they'll be fair, but if they get kind of bored, like who cares? Like you're just a
Right.
human to them.
Yeah, like they don't really have to like feed like a vampire does. Like they don't really have
Yeah.
to kill you. There's not really a big to
Right.
do. There's not much at stake for them. They're just kind of doing
Yeah.
their thing.
they're
Like,
vibing. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
They're just popping in, seeing what's
And I
up.
think Clive Barker because I read a lot of Clive Barker and I watched a lot of his stuff for. I mean, I used it for the last ones, but also for the Empty Space, just as kind of inspiration.
Yeah.
And it is that thing where he really knows how to like. There's so little known about the Cenobites, but you also feel like you're not missing anything. You understand who they are, but like explorers from a different dimension, what could that mean?
Right. Are you Earthlings first? Dimension
Yeah.
second? Like, how did this happen? But it doesn't
Right,
matter.
exactly.
But it does, but it doesn't.
And like because they're all dressed up obviously in like this BDSM leather and stuff. But then at one point they go with or Christy goes into like their little labyrinth, and it's all like castle hallways made of big stone, and so it's this weird mix of like old Gothic, new Gothic, futuristic Gothic, and it really does make them feel like, oh, these guys are timeless. Like they've come
Right.
from all times.
Yeah.
And so I think that adds a lot to their character. Also, there's nothing creepier than like a old hallway,
I know.
and he really like shines on them. And there's also nothing creepier than a giant penis monster that chases you down a long hallway.
Yeah.
And Clive Barker does both of
I was
those
gonna say,
things.
yeah, there are other monsters in this.
Yeah. 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 That was like the most dangerous one. That was like the
Yeah, because
total weapon.
he didn't even like there's like a big monster in the labyrinth. I guess once you get in there, it's just like a free for all, and like you're just screwed.
Right. Do they ever like socialize? Do they like watch TV,
Yeah.
or do they just constantly just brood through this like temple?
Yeah, do they ever get like a little time? Well, that's what happens is that they had a TV break to watch Succession, and then Frank
Right.
booked it because he doesn't like Rory Culkin.
Yeah. He fucked it all up. There were 3 seasons, man.
There's also like, and I completely forgot this the first time I saw it, but there's like a homeless man like
Oh yeah.
stalking Christy the whole time, and then at the
Yeah.
very end she like throws the puzzle box away, um, and like into a fire, and then this homeless man transforms into like a
Right.
winged gargoyle and just grabs it and then like
Yeah.
flies off. But it's like, does he like work for them? I guess I never explains. I don't even know if that guy comes back.
See, but
You know?
Yeah.
I love stuff like that where they
Yeah.
like, especially with this kind of horror film, where they just add something that's so ridiculous that they don't even explain.
Well, like you didn't
fucking-
even need that. Like you could have
Yeah.
assumed the puzzle box
I know.
makes its way back, but you're like, no, good.
He could've just disappeared.
Gargoyle.
You know who loves to do
Just
that is Sam Raimi, where he's like, "Oh yeah, now Ash can just turn into little mirror ashes. I don't know, who cares?"
it's like it's fun. We're having fun. No, and I do like it a lot, actually.
Yeah.
I wonder if that homeless gargoyle man comes back in the sequel. So I'm
Right.
eager to learn more.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see.
Also, whenever
But
that
yeah,
guy eats the crickets in the pet shop, it was like that part in Mulholland Drive. Whenever they see that crazy person behind the diner,
oh
Oh
yeah,
it
yeah,
reminded me so much of that. Like it
I
gave
could
me the
see
same
that.
vibe. I was like, oh god, that was probably the creepiest part of the movie. Was when she's
yeah,
like staring at her, just like eating the crickets, and she's just like,
Th-
"I'm at work."
See, that
Like,
was one of those where I was watching it, being like, "Oh, he's angling his hand in a way where he doesn't have to actually eat them.
oh
He
yeah,
just says the right." It's just I was like thinking of the filmmaking in that scene, because I was like, "Oh, so gross if he actually had to do it." But
I
I was like,
know.
"No, they angled it so he doesn't."
Yeah, he's good.
So
He's good.
yeah.
yeah,
That's always good. Yeah, and I think like I don't know, especially the acting. Like everyone, I mean, Doug Bradley obviously did such an iconic job that it's hard to think of anyone else. But everyone does such a good job. Like Ashley Lawrence does a surprisingly good job considering how young she is and how much she has to do.
Yeah,
And like Frank does like the perfect job of being like the creepy uncle who's like just sticky.
yeah.
Like, you can tell Frank smells a little bit, you know.
Oh, totally. Yeah,
And like
yeah.
Julia does a great job. Like
yeah,
the Julia like is Jack Nicholson in The Shining level of like, how did you not know this guy was gonna turn on you? You know?
yeah. She does a good job of like being paranoid, but also like really determined, trying to keep
Yeah,
it together. But also, there's like a little emotion left in her, a little humanity.
yeah,
She
yeah. You
definitely
can
has a pretty good performance for sure.
well, and her character is so good because it's kind of like she's marrying the husband obviously for his money, and she doesn't really like. You could tell that she's like this soulless person, and then she meets Frank, and it's like the first time she's felt emotion ever,
Yeah,
and so like she falls in love, and it's like the person you fall in love with is literally casting demons. And so
right.
Well, that's what she's drawn to, is
yeah,
darkness.
and well, and
So yeah,
it's such a good like portrayal of like she's fallen in love with the worst human being, but she's also a bad person. So this is the person she would fall in love with, you know?
Right. It all checks out.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
And
weird.
so,
Oh, what
oh,
were
go
you
ahead.
I was watching that movie, Under the Skin. Have you guys ever seen that movie?
Oh yeah,
I
I
just
no,
saw
I've
it
never
with
seen it. I've heard things.
I saw with Mark in theaters. We went to go see it together.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Like it's just weird because it's like that movie's also about like just a woman driving around picking up dudes and pretty much murdering them. and
Right.
it's like it was a back-to-back double feature of just films showing like how easy your prey is if you're a
Yeah.
woman and you're trying to kill a dude. Like it's just the easiest fucking hunt. Like it's not even fair. And like it probably would happen that way.
Yeah.
Like if you were kind of drunk and single and someone's just like, "Hey, do you need a ride?" It's like, "Fuck yeah, I need a ride."
Yeah.
Like it would just be, I don't know. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. It's just sad.
Seriously. It's almost like, yeah, both of those movies should have been like, oh, we have too many guys.
Right.
We've found too many men for this role.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I do it is this thing. I mean, it's not just horror, it's everything nowadays is like kind of neutered in terms of sexuality. And I kind of, you kind of get it, but you miss those days. Like this movie, like the Hellraiser guys are about pleasure and pain. So sexual pleasure has to come into it. And this movie does not hold back. Like everyone's boning
Yeah.
in this movie.
Yeah.
And so it's just like it's funny, but it's refreshing to see that like we don't cut away. We get all the information we need. It's not overly sexual, like it's not NC-17 or anything, but we understand that this is a sexual story, and it
Yeah.
really helps like make it more real, you know.
Yeah, I would say so. Even the little statues are fucking in this movie.
Yeah. The set design is so good in this film.
Yeah. Yeah, even in like the dinner scene or like the kitchen that had been left for days, like all the maggots and stuff, like that was they just
Mhm.
went right in there. Like they had to have like a bowl full of maggots and cockroaches that they just like brought
Yeah.
onto set, and they were like, "Yeah, just put it there." It's like
Yeah.
it's so fucked up, it's so gross.
And yeah, the set I mean, there's like a scene where Frank has a puzzle box and he's just surrounded by candles, and that's all you can see. But that's all you need to see, and it's such a cool shot
Yeah,
that like I don't know. Yeah, it's so inventive and so fun to watch this movie.
totally.
Very good. It's a very good movie. It's also like I always find it harder to talk about like classic films like this because everyone knows it's good, but you have to cover it before we jump into 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Before we get into the garbage pile, you're
Yeah.
Because
saying?
you want to
Yeah.
see where they come from and how they change. That's so yeah, I feel like this movie I would say it's great to go watch. It's always on Amazon or Tubi or something. So go watch at least the first Hellraiser. It's good for independent filmmakers. It's good for horror fans. And if you can stomach it and you're not a horror fan, you probably find something interesting. Like the story is interesting even without the horror stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would definitely recommend it. Guys, do you have any last thoughts?
I don't know what I thought this movie was like. I don't know why I didn't like it the first time I saw it, but yeah, I would say I'm really glad that I found Clive Barker, even though it was kind of later in life, because he's disgusting and like really funny. And I would say watch this movie and anything else you can find by Clive Barker.
Yeah, yeah. And it is funny, like Clive Barker and H.P. Lovecraft are probably the like gods of cosmic horror.
Yeah,
And they couldn't be more on the different spectrum of who they are
Yeah.
as people.
totally. Yeah,
Like Clive Barker's super cool, he's gay, he's always helping independent films, and
right.
H.P. Lovecraft is the opposite of
Yeah.
everything I just said.
Oh, is there something wrong with his personal life?
Oh, I don't
I don't
know.
know. Check it out online.
It
He was a
is kind
lover
of
of
like
all.
I do
Does he
remember
have these strong
reading.
opinions?
I do remember reading it, like one of his books. Everyone's like, "Yeah, that's how he was in his personal life," but in his books, and then I read like all his stories, and I'm like, "No, it's in there.
Yeah,
It's in there quite a bit."
very expressive man.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
don't.
like
There's not naming cats is hard.
Yeah,
But yeah, so yeah, I would say this is a great movie. It's a great introduction, especially if you haven't seen any cosmic horror and you really want to. I would check this one out.
yeah,
And
it'll
so
be
this,
interesting. Oh, go
yeah.
ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was gonna say because well, like a year ago, you and I did all the Texas Chainsaws, and it was like two good movies, and then it fell off a cliff immediately. So I'm curious if we're gonna see a very sharp turn with the
right.
Hellraiser films as well.
When does the graph
Like
drop?
is this two gonna be that thing where it's like, oh, it's not as good as one, but it's still good in a different way, and then it just I don't know. I'm curious.
Yeah.
I'm curious how they can maintain it. I mean, you've seen them all, right?
Well, if it makes you feel better, I like them all.
Okay.
Well, that doesn't make me.
No.
You
Yeah.
also like Texas Chainsaw 5.
Yeah, it's the best one.
So,
But yeah, it will be interesting because again, it's so hard to do a character like the Cenobites. So it's curious to see how other people like tackle them, and just to see how like you go about this story if you have it. And I think to me that's why I'll always watch the sequels, because like the Texas Chainsaw movies, you know what the story is gonna be before you even put it on. Like there's not a lot of divergence in what,
Yeah.
like it's a bunch of teens, they go to a house, but there's so many different ways you can take Pinhead. So it's curious to see how each director will approach the subject. But next week we stay with Clive. We stay with our old buddy Barker boy, as he did Hellraiser 2.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool.
We'll find out for sure.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
know he was heavily involved at least. I think he did direct it as well.
Okay.
But yeah, Hellraiser 2 next week. And we'll see you guys there. And also, yeah, welcome to the Bomb Squad. If you're new here from the He-Man episode, we do these podcasts every week. So join us. And also, we'll have more deep dives and stuff this year. But welcome. We're very excited for this year. Very cool stuff. And if you haven't yet, like and subscribe. When we get to 100 subscribers, we're going to do a special movie. And also, when we get to 1,000 subscribers, we're going to do Southland Tales. Because that's not, that one, it has to hit a great amount of people.
Yeah. They need
So
to
we'll
know.
figure out.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We need to
need
get
to
all
spread our
the eyes
message.
Yeah.
on Southland Tales.
And then 10,000, who knows?
Yeah.
Audition?
Well, audition's good. See,
Well-
for our special, we really want to bring up something that's like universally hated that we like Southland Tales that everyone hates, but they're wrong. So we'll think of something good. But yeah, but welcome back to the Bomb Squad, and we'll see you next week as we go further into the labyrinth of hell. Bye, guys.
So
Thanks for watching the Bomb Squad. Please, while you're here, give us a like and a subscribe. We really appreciate it and it means a lot.